All right, Brianna, take it away.
All right. So, very popular topic, of course, the chapter and regional communities, excuse me, that you guys all have access to. So, I had to start with this lovely image because I think that we can all identify with this. At least I know I could when I was in chapter leadership. There's this wonderful box that typically gets transferred from one set of leadership to the next, to the next, to the next, and it gets stored in your office or your garage or wherever you just have room to store that wonderful box. So the communities can be a good way to get rid of that box and instead store things virtually. Um, Also, great place to store things online so that everyone has access. Obviously, I know some others have mentioned this, but the Google Drive or Dropbox, sometimes there are firewall issues accessing that from your work. I know I had that issue when I was a chapter leader and working at my former employer. I was not able to access some of those without special permission. So obviously you can access the communities from anywhere. So it's a great storage site in that way. Also, free storage and unlimited storage. So you don't have to worry about taking your files down from year to year. You can keep building upon and adding files throughout the years as your chapter leadership changes and your community group stays there. So some basics about the community. And I'll go through, after I'm done with this portion, I will hop out to the website and actually show you this information. But so the defaults with the community are that you receive an email every time someone posts a discussion or comments on that discussion. And obviously, that's not so great. We don't need any more emails. So I will show you how to modify that when I hop out to the website. But the other thing that is a default is that when a new file is posted to the library, you do not receive an email notification. So you would just happen to go out there and see it, or I'll explain another way too. Also the same with the calendar. If a new event is posted to the calendar, you also would not receive notification of that. So the only thing that you would receive automatic notification is with the default settings is a discussion or a comment on a discussion. And like I mentioned, I'll show you how to update all of that soon. One thing I would recommend, and I'll show you, is setting up email digests. So you can set up either a daily or a weekly digest for each group that you are a part of on the community, and it can be different by group. So for me, I have daily email digests for Leadership Connection, but other groups, like we have an internal staff group, I just have a weekly notification email digest that comes to me for that. And I'll show you an example of what one of those emails looks like as well, but I would recommend for everyone to sign up for one of those, especially if you do opt to not receive those discussion notifications. So the email digest gives you a summary of everything that happened in that community group. So that could be, the discussions, those comments on the discussions, a new library post, or a new calendar notification or calendar event that was created. So all of that, a summary of all of that would come in that email digest, so daily or weekly. So as a member of your community group, your regional or your chapter community groups, you are able to post a discussion topic. You're able to post files to the library, and then you're also able to add or view calendar items. So all of that is things that you can currently do in your chapter or regional groups. And then I'll also show you this. We've put together a community FAQ page that walks you through information on updating those discussion notifications. Also, there's information out here about how to change your time zone. So that's one of those important features to do, especially if you're a person that is hosting new calendar events to your community. Because when you, and I'll show you the process, but when you are going out to create a new calendar event, you do have to change the time zone. So if you're, you know, in Central Time, Eastern Time, whatever, you have to update the time zone every single time that you create a calendar event. So unless you go into your settings and update your time zone there. So that just kind of simplifies the process if you are someone that is going to be out there creating calendar events. So by default, we have included certain position codes, leadership position codes, in the chapter and regional groups. So the regional groups, that the members of that group are the RE team, so RE, RE2, RE3, and then the chapter presidents and presidents-elect for that region. And then your chapter community groups, the default roles are president, president-elect, vice president, treasurer, secretary if you have that combined role, assistant treasurer, and then both voting and non-voting directors. Those are the defaults. If you need to add members to a group, that is completely okay and very possible. We would just ask that you let us know who you would like to add, and then we can go in and do that. And the reason why it's easiest for us to add is because we actually tie it into our system so that at the end of the chapter year, those roles end. So then starting a new year, new chapter year, the new position codes would take effect, and the new leadership would have access to that community group. So it's all role-based, if that makes sense. So it's easiest for us to add those for you. Also, we've seen some chapters and regions have asked to add subgroups for their community groups. And you can add a subgroup, you know, whether it's a technology committee, maybe you have an annual conference that you're working on and you want to post documents and communicate via community, we can create a separate community for that as well. So there's really a lot that you can do, and I'm going to pop out to the website. And actually, first I'm going to show you just an example of what an email digest looks like. So this is an email digest, and as you can see, it's showing me new files that were posted that day. Since I have a daily digest, you can have a weekly digest as well. And then also it's showing you any discussions that were created that day. So you can see it's a summary at the top. What were the new files? What were the discussions? And then below, you can actually see the detail. So very easy way to get a summary of what has happened rather than getting inundated every single time something's posted. So now I'm going to show you how to update these things. So first of all, I'm sure all of you are familiar with how to get to the community, but in case you're not, this is the HFMA homepage. Community is just right at the top. So that's where you would go. And once you click on that, this is the community homepage that comes up. And then you can go to My Groups. Now I have a lot of groups. So I have created a bookmark for Leadership Connection since I go to that the most. So this is the Leadership Connection homepage. Now from here, like I mentioned, by default, you are going to get an email anytime a new discussion is posted. So if I go out to the discussions page, right over here on the side, it says turn form notifications off. So if I did not want to receive an email every time a discussion is posted or a comment is made, I would have, my lovely cat is joining me for this discussion. You would just hit turn form notifications off, and then you no longer will receive an email every time a discussion is posted. I want to receive them because I just don't get enough emails, but that's what you would do. Now, to change those email digest options, because like I mentioned, by default, you do not get email digests. There's a couple different ways you can do this. So if I go back to the home page for Leadership Connection, right here at the top, it says Email Digest Options. So if I click on that, it will bring up a pop-up that asks me if I normally, yours would say not subscribed, but I can choose daily or weekly right here. So I have daily, and there you go. Now instead of getting an email every time a discussion is posted, I will just get an email daily with all the summary of content. Now I'm going to show you a separate way to go in and do this in case you're a member of many community groups and want to update this all in one swoop. So I'll go up to my account. So top right corner, if you're following along on your screen, I'll go to settings. And then email digest right here. And as you can see, all my list of groups are on here. All of your chapter and community groups, I do not subscribe to. So you can post anything out there. I'm not going to see it. But this would be where I would go in to each group and change whether I want to receive something daily or weekly. Now, as long as I'm out in the settings, I'll also show you here where you would update that time zone. So under options, you'll see time zone. Now, I'm pretty sure if you are all out there, it might say universal time zone, which who knows what that really is, but I would go ahead and update to whatever time zone you are so that when you're out in the calendar, you're seeing things in your own time zone. All right. So I'm going to go back to my groups. Actually, first I'll go back to the community homepage here so you can see how I get out here again. But if you ever have questions, I mean, some of this stuff is posted to the community, of course, but there's a community FAQ page that everyone can easily access. And here you can see things like creating a calendar event, setting your time zone. You can see the lovely little snapshots of my face right there. So that is all out there. If you're not following along and you want to go out later and make those changes, that FAQ is right here on the community homepage. So I'll go back to my groups and I'll go to Leadership Connection since you all have access to that. So you can see at the top we have discussion, library, calendar, members, mentions, tags, subgroups. So subgroups would be, like I mentioned before, if you wanted to have a subgroup for your technology committee, for your annual conference, that would be where they would show up. They also show up along the side. So in your communities, if you ever want to create a discussion, all you do is navigate and hit this new at the top. And then this page comes up. You can add a subject, you can add a description, and then you can add tags. Now, you can think of a tag kind of as a keyword search. So if I wanted to add, here's ones that I've already used, but LTC, these things just help if someone was going to do a keyword search on the page. And I'll show you how to do that. But very simple, and then you would just post. So another feature of the library, which I know a lot of you have used, we have many folders out in our Leadership Connection library, and we do have some default folders in your chapter community groups as well. If you do ever want a folder added, just send us a note, let us know what you want the name of that folder to be, and we can easily create that for you. One thing I'll note, for the chapter and regional community groups, we've found that you could, there's a lot of different ways that you can go about it. Right now, I believe we have board meetings as one of the default folders out in your library. Now, you could add a fiscal year folder if you wanted to post everything for 1 year there, or you could also add everything to one folder and then tag based on the year. Kind of is up to you and how you might want to organize that, but both are good options. I think many of you are also familiar with the calendar, but same kind of concept. When you're creating a calendar event, you just navigate to the calendar, click new, and then you would fill in all of your information. And you can see here it's defaulting to the Central Time Zone since I set that as my time zone in the settings. And we always just set it to no registration required, just because we aren't actually using this site as the registration mechanism. Now, tags. So do you remember how I mentioned that you can add tags and you can add them to file folders in your library? You can add them to the calendar events. You can add them to your discussion posts. So what happens with those tags? So you can see tags are an option at the top when you're looking at the ribbon. Now, everything that I have tagged would show up here. And you can see, depending on the number of tags, the word is bigger. So for instance, July 10th LTC. All of the things that I have tagged with July 10th LTC show up here. So it's a quick, easy way to get to something on a specific topic. And it would pull up your folders, your files within a folder in the library here. It would pull up discussions, it would pull up calendar events. So anything that is tagged with that word could be found here. So I should pause in case there are any questions that have come through.
Brianna, do you ever use hashtags for your tags?
I don't, but you could. You absolutely could. You can literally type anything as a tag. Any other questions or anything I can help show you? I know some of you we've done have requested one-on-one sessions. So if any of you are on and if there's something I didn't share that I shared with you on one of those sessions, feel free to let me know too.
So if a hashtag was added to a tag, would it populate without the hashtag? So if I did hashtag FPM and then I just typed in FPM in the search, would it come up? Yeah, because I know that the search function when we had, I just want to be careful about adding things because if somebody doesn't put it in there, it may not populate when you search for something. So I would just be.
But everything would show up here if you go to tags.
Oh, I see what you're saying. But if you wanted to search by a tag, if you put a hashtag there,
yeah,
there's nothing that would populate, right?
It might start to populate, but
okay,
you could miss it. I would probably be
I would just be careful with that one. That was all I wanted to say.
Any other questions? Does it make sense? Well, if anyone does have questions afterwards, you can always reach out to us and we can walk through this with you one-on-one. There's no dumb questions. I spend a lot of time in here, so it's easy for me to navigate. But
Brianna, I have a question. This is Tracy Quinn. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So if we are wanting to utilize this within our chapter and we create a folder, can everybody see that or is that just our
Good
chapter?
question. Good question. So only that group, even if only the members of that specific community group can see it, even if you created a subgroup underneath your group, so say you wanted a technology committee and that was a subgroup of your chapter community, even that subgroup would not see what you post in the parent group, and vice versa. If they post something in the subgroup and you're not a member of that subgroup, you're not going to see it. So it has to be only the members of that specific community group. Good question.
And Rebecca has a question about, does every chapter already have a folder set up, or do we need to manually do that?
So everyone has a community, all the chapters have a community group set up, and there are default folders in your library. Each chapter has the same default folders, but if you would like different folders added, we can absolutely do that. Very easy. If someone wanted me to do it right now, I could show you. It's very quick.
That would be
You
awesome.
demonstrate how to create a new folder in the library.
I can, and
Yes.
no, I have access to do that, but that's not something.
Can you demonstrate though how to do it? Can you just can you add a folder in the library real quick? Just call it test and then we can delete it.
Mm-hmm.
So right now we have this at the certain roles and responsibilities for the community. So Brianna can go in here and do this. If you want new folders created, Brianna, can they create their own folders within their community?
Not by default. We could give you access to do that, but by default, we are the only ones that can create it. And to be honest, I think most people I've talked to would like us to do that. But if you want to, we absolutely can give you access to do that.
I think that looks like all the questions so far.
All right. Good deal. Well, I would, if you haven't had a chance to use the community, I would say it's a great tool to use. And if you can definitely use it as a communication tool within your leadership group as well. If you go out and, use the discussions and you're opted into the notifications for your own small group, then anytime something is posted, you could essentially decide when you're going to have your next board meeting via a discussion. One of the fun tools I've found in here is that you can actually insert a poll in a discussion. So I could say, when should we have our next board meeting, and put them as options, and then people could vote. So there's a lot of tools that you can play around with in there.
Tracy, she has, when you add a folder to the library, how does it default to log into our specific chapter? You actually, if you go to my groups in the community, you should see your chapter there. So when Brianna got in here, she went into the leadership connection, but here, if you go back to the community home, you have a tab that says my groups, and you should see your chapter in there. If you don't, Tracy, let us know. Because you should have access into your chapter one. But the folder that she just put it in is in the leadership connection. So if you wanted folders added to your specific Wisconsin folder, we would go into Wisconsin and add that into the library.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I just see my region, so maybe that's why.
Yeah, so we can get you added. Let me go look, and we can look at that and let you know today.
Okay.
And then Mike McKeever has, is there an estimate timeline on correcting initial setup issues? Yes, we're aware of that. And I know that our team, Melanie, Melanie is working with our IT team on the syncing with our member data. And what we did was, we didn't want anybody just to have access into your chapters. We initially just set it up for the board. If you want more people added to it, you can send that to Brianna or the chapter at hpma.org, and we can work through that. And right now, Mike, we are working on that, but it is not complete that I was aware of before yesterday. So we will give an update as soon as that is complete on the correction. Who do I contact if I assign to the wrong chapter group? Jason Williams, we will be in contact today. We will look into that and get you into the right chapter group.
Thank you.
And that is what Mike is referring to from the initial.
Okay.
So we will definitely, I'm writing your name down now. So we will look into that today and send you either a message via chat or we'll respond over email.
Yeah, if there's ever something that you notice that's off, just let us know. Like Mike mentioned, there is an issue that we're working on, and we're aware of some issues with initial setup items, but we can, in the meantime, while we're working through that, we can definitely make manual corrections. So please let us know. It's an easy fix on our end. So.
Yeah, so Stacy, you're absolutely right. If you want access to do that, some people want it and some people don't from adding, individuals. There is a lot of individuals to choose from. And if you, like, let's say there's Brian Smith and there's 5 Brian Smiths to add to a group. If you don't know exactly what their member ID is, it's a little difficult to add them into the group. And that's why we've kind of left it at the level that we've left it. And to be able to navigate some of those things are not as easy as one would think, that you just click on the name and you appear into that group. So that's the reason that we have the restriction. If you would like to have that access, Brianna would be more than happy to get on a quick call and go over how to do all of those things.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, feel free to, like I mentioned, reach out to us if you have questions or you notice anything is off, and we will work with you on that. So now I have the pleasure to turn it over to Jeff Johnson and Michelle Cooper from the Oregon chapter to talk through all of the technology pieces to streaming that Tracy was talking about a little bit earlier. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm going to share my screen here to make sure we bring up our PowerPoint. Sorry, get that there. And hopefully everyone can see my screen.
Yep.
And hear me just fine. So we were given just a few minutes to join you wonderful presidents, and we are honored to be part of the program today. Michelle and I have worked long and hard with the Oregon chapter to do a little bit more. I take advantage of everything we can as far as technology goes to bring the best experience to our members. So we just wanted to share some of the things that we've learned along the way, some of the gotchas that we find out there, and of course answer any questions that you may have. So with that, my name is Jeff Johnson, and on with me is
Michelle Cooper. Nice to be with you all. Thank you.
That's us. So today they asked us to review a little bit more about just the technology itself, equipment requirements, if there are any, and of course the best methods of live streaming. So with that, we'll jump right into our agenda. So reviewing the technology that's out there, this goes from Dropbox to YouTube, from Zoom to Teams, identifying what's best for your chapter. There's a lot that is being made available to organizations today. As you know, these are probably some of the top platforms that you use daily when you're interacting with either your clients or in different environments. Obviously, for many HFMA chapters, we've opted to go with Zoom because that's what the association has chosen, and they've provided some great pricing for us. There are other platforms though, and we just wanted to make you aware of that because one of those platforms and their features may actually meet your needs as a chapter better than Zoom, depending on what you're doing. So it's always good. There is a reference in the slide where you can go and look and see how the different platforms compare to each other and some of the features that they have. It's always good to be shopping around too, based on what you're doing so that your chapter and your members are getting the best experience, whether it be online or whether it be partially in person and also online. Michelle, do you have anything to add?
I think the only thing to be aware of is, and Jeff's listed both of them off, but as you're setting up different components and as you're considering different platforms, make sure you understand the difference between their meeting platform and their webinar platform. Because depending on what you intend to do, one may work better than the other. So like if you want breakout sessions, you're going to need, to go with different platform than if you're just doing presenting. Or if you want to be able to see people, like in this combination, you're going to have options and want to have that as part of your consideration. So know who is speaking and know what their goals are.
Yeah, that's probably the biggest thing that's been the gotcha for our chapter is we get down the path, we set up a webinar thinking it's going to be this big webinar, and we're meeting with the presenter a few days before, and they really say, no, I really want to see everyone's face and I want them to talk. And then suddenly we're sending out a new link to try to do a meeting versus a webinar. So like Michelle said, that discussion with your presenters well in advance is really key. Mm-hmm. Obviously, we have chosen this. Just a couple of benefits that we've found over GoToMeeting. We used to be on GoToMeeting as a chapter before the association found the great pricing through Zoom. But the benefits of Zoom over GoToMeeting, they have the breakout rooms, which are so easy and fun for people to use. And we're not really finding that in any of the other platforms right now. And of course, multiple recording levels. In other packages, what you'll find is they record just a flat thing. You have options in Zoom to record many different things, from just the presenter's face to just the audio to all the discussion points that happen in the chats, and that's great. One thing that we were hoping for that we haven't seen in Zoom so far is GoToMeeting had certificates available that they would automatically mail out. So we weren't relying on someone to go back and mail out your participation and stuff like that. But we're accommodating that through the Zoom. But just know there are some different options on the different platforms. We also want to talk about content storage and sharing. Thank you so much, Brianna, for touching on the HFMA community free storage, because that's huge for all of us. I don't know if you're out there working with your organizations, but when you're sharing content, you do those presentations, you want that to be advantageous for the people who maybe weren't able to participate during your meeting, but are your members. And so our chapters actually, we use Dropbox just to share stuff internally, and now we're slowly migrating over to the free storage with the HFMA community. And when we're done, we're providing that content to all of our members for future use using either YouTube or, of course, or our website itself, Oregon HFMA. So we have a couple of gotchas, and Michelle was going to talk about those when it comes to utilizing Dropbox and YouTube.
So we also push out the content. So we post it to YouTube, we post it to the website. We also push it out to the social media, so that we're trying to reach particularly the younger members are, in many, many ways just enmeshed in the social media world. So the way we can reach them is pushing out information to Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, etc. One of the gotchas we figured out with Dropbox, though, was if you are paying for a business, what they call a enterprise license in Dropbox, which is only $45 a month. So it's really, not a bad price. However, if you share that Dropbox with a person who has a personal Dropbox, it will quickly max out their memory availability. So your personal Dropbox have a limited amount of available space. And so if you're paying for one, it's got a lot more available space. So just be aware of that when you're making the decision what platforms to use. With YouTube, we found out the hard way that depending on how you're logged in, if you're still logged into like the YouTube account and you do a search for personal, because I want to go see the most recent Taylor Swift videos, that will now populate your HFMA windows. So if somebody logs in, opens up YouTube and looks at Oregon HFMA, and somebody has done a search, it will be amazingly apparent what has been searched for. So just be aware of that and make sure you're logging out of your YouTube, your HFMA YouTube before you go searching for information.
Thank you, Michelle. It's so true. So I just quickly wanted to jump over, if it's okay, to our YouTube channel, just so you guys can see how we're utilizing that. And this is our YouTube channel today. Hopefully you guys can see that. But it just shows all of the videos and the content. And so it's a great place for our members to come and see some of the stuff that we've been sharing, past education if they want to sit down with their teams. We have quite a few videos out here. They can continue that education. Now we know that obviously that doesn't count towards CPEs and stuff like that. If they go back and watch it after, it has to be live, but it's still a great resource. And we just wanted to show you how we're utilizing YouTube to continue to educate our members even after the fact. A little bit more on just the platforms and the technology itself and how we're utilizing that in Oregon. We're utilizing it obviously like other chapters for that chapter education for these events that are happening, for regional events as well. We're participating there. Chapter networking events are really important, but we have found so many different games and pushing stuff live and finding great success in sharing that through the online media. We also have what we call our problem solving, so it actually become a really big portion of what Oregon HFMA offers, but we do have all the hospitals that get together, and we have a session that's free to everyone in the entire community, regardless of where you're at, where you can come in and hear what these leaders are thinking and doing and dealing with. And that happens every month, which has been very big and important. Michelle talked about the social media pushes. We have chapter podcasts, and something unique that our chapter president wanted to do, Tammy Kuhn, this year is have it not only a podcast, but we also go ahead and we put that on YouTube. And we've noticed that since we've also included the video of us talking, our hits have gone up dramatically. More and more people are engaged with that, and we're getting great feedback. So just some FYI on that. Of course, vendor recognition is huge, and we are playing stuff before and after, and we're tying that into all of the media that we produce, so that they're getting that extra recognition, of course, and member engagement. So this is the what. This is what we just talked about. This is how we're doing it. These are some of the tools that we're using. I won't go over each one, but you guys can see them there. And of course, this presentation is being made available to you. So if you want to go back and reference any of the slides, you may.
The one thing, Jeff, before you jump forward, I do want to mention Buffer, because that is a really cool functionality for the social media. If you are lazy like I am, and I don't really want to have to log into every single social media account to push out a public, an announcement or social video or something like that, you can use Buffer to actually push out to multiple social media platforms at the same time. You can also schedule them in the future. So if you have 5 that you want to go out over the next 10 days, one every other day, you can schedule them in such a fashion. So Buffer is something worth looking into, particularly if you're using multiple social media platforms.
Awesome. Thank you. So we have a best practice out there that you guys can look at. I think the most important thing is just, like Michelle said before, know what you're dealing with in your chapter, know where you want to take the education, and then set things up appropriately and take the time to do it, and test and test and test and test a million times before you go live with your members, just to make it the best experience. We know that security is also very important, and we know that Zoom has put in those security protocols for us, but always keep that in mind as you go to put that together. Hardware also becomes very important, and we're going to share it during this session. Michelle's going to kick us off just talking about leveraging the hardware, and we're going to show both what we're doing today, which are these online meetings, and the hardware that you need, but also taking us through what happens when we go back as a chapter and we're meeting in person. What are those tools that we need to make sure that we can continue to use this technology and have the hardware to support it? So we'll move into that.
Yeah, so, one of the biggest things that we find, not only for online, but even in person, is you really need hard internet connections. Wi-Fi is amazing and really useful in a lot of situations, but for streaming and things like where you're trying to do online webinars or online meetings, A hard connection is much more stable. Just think about the bingo game of how many times everyone fills the square of I lost my Wi-Fi connection and I had to shift or I had to wait for it to reboot. So hardwires are really beneficial. You also really need 2 people running the event. You really need somebody to manage the presenter, do the polling, do the sponsorship videos, all of that, and somebody to watch the chat. So like I've been responding to a couple of the chats while Jeff has been talking. So you really need somebody to fill that role. So just making sure that you are looking at the, participants, looking at and have kind of all of that covered as part of the online equipment requirements. And if Jeff advances the slide, we can talk about in-person requirements also, I think is the next slide.
Yeah, before you go, I just wanted to mention, I know a lot of us are using those breakouts in Zoom, which are really great, but something that we've learned as a chapter is really make sure you know that you tell the participants that a speaker is going to be doing the breakout, just so they know that I probably need an audio tool to communicate if we're doing the breakout. We've had situations where people didn't know that breakouts were going to occur. They go into a breakout room, they don't even have an audio device to talk, so they're trying to chat to people, and it's just not the same when you're in a breakout and you can't engage with the audio and the video. So letting your members know that that's going to occur, and that if they can, it's best to have the audio on, is really important. So we just wanted to share that.
So we already talked about the hard connection. This is just a list. I'm not going to go through all of these different components. There's a much more detailed presentation that Jeff and I did that I think Tracy can make available. But making sure you have a table to put your equipment, video camera, dongle. We'll look at the next slide, and which actually gives you what we purchased. And all of this is actually stored in my office or my garage in some fashion. We wireless mics, so you do end up having to purchase a wireless mic that plugs into your computer. This is so then when the speaker is actually starting to speak in an in-person event, they will have the honor of wearing 2 different mics. One will be for the room, one will be for the computer. And then we also gave information here on what the dongles are that we were able to purchase. Be sure you know what kind of computer you're going to be plugging that dongle into, because it makes a difference. And a camcorder, tripod, all of that information. In light of time, I'm not going to spend a great deal of time. But the biggest thing to be aware of, I believe on the next slide, is don't go cheap. We made the mistake of trying to purchase a cheaper camera at one point to save money, and we returned it twice before we finally just spent the money to buy a better camera. So just be aware that, going cheap doesn't necessarily save you money. You also can look at vendors. We all have amazing vendors and sponsors who help us, and looking to one of those who might be willing to help sponsor the fees that are associated with the equipment purchases is one way that you can help to finance purchasing the equipment. And remember, you're not purchasing the equipment every single year. You can purchase it and then you can move on. In the bigger presentation, there's also comments. Be sure that you are thinking about how many rooms do we usually take up when we're meeting in person. So if you have breakout sessions and you have 2 breakout sessions, you need 2 sets of camera equipment. So be aware that you kind of think ahead and think forward to how do we set up our in-person events so that you can determine how much equipment you really need to purchase.
Thank you, Michelle. And what's so great about having this equipment available when we go back into that environment where we have our presenters who are in front of an audience, but we still have half of our chapter who's sitting online, because we still will have that. This is a way to reach both audiences, right? You're in front of them, but you're still streaming, and you're creating the same environment for the people that are online as the people in person are having. And so that's why this becomes important. And of course, it's very affordable. I think if you go back and look at some of these numbers, that's not an extreme amount, and yet it's something that's very doable for chapters. And having practiced it across with other chapters, brought my equipment and done it, it's very easy to learn and implement as well. So if you have any questions on that, let us know. We're happy to walk you through it. I want to talk a little bit more about this live streaming methodology to ensure that positive experience for everyone who's online. And here's some of the things that we have learned. So it really comes down to that speaker. Speaker requirements are so important. And like we mentioned before, that practice with your speakers is important. there will be tons of presenters who tell you they're very comfortable doing the online presentations, that they do it all the time. And then you start walking through the practice session and you see that their eyes get big and they're like, wait, I can do what? And it opens up great discussion for you as a chapter in preparing them, and of course, preparing the presentation as well, knowing when to kick a poll live, whether or not they want to use Mentimeter because they want a more open discussion with the group, or whether or not they're fine with just multiple choice polling at the end of the day. Again, we've been caught multiple times by a presenter who suddenly changed their mind and wanted breakout rooms, but we had a webinar set up. Well, you can't do a breakout room in a webinar. You can only do a breakout room in a meeting. So then we're trying to send new links out to everybody, and that's just not the best experience. So I can't stress enough, and weeks in advance, sitting down with your presenters, making that mandatory to walk through, make sure that you're comfortable, they're comfortable, to provide that best experience. Another thing, obviously our presenters have to sign off that they agree to be recorded, that their content will become part of our content. Michelle talked about if it is in person, they have to be willing to wear 2 microphones. That means you want to let them know in advance. You want someone to show up in a beautiful outfit with no pockets, trying to figure out where they're going to hang 2 lavaliers off of themselves. So having that communication again in advance, super important. I will say that if we do end up back in a live environment where we're also streaming, super important to talk to the audience and let them know that it is being streamed, so that they don't walk in front of the cameras or maybe make noise that they wouldn't normally want heard online.
The other,
Yeah,
sorry, Jeff. The other thing from that slide, is make sure that your presenters are sending you the presentations in a PowerPoint format. A lot of presenters like to convert their PowerPoints to PDF just to protect protect editing and things like that. That does not stream well at all. So a PowerPoint is a much better option, which seems somewhat intuitive, but you'd be amazed at how many times we end up with a PDF being emailed to us, and then we have to go back and say, no, we really need a PowerPoint. So just be aware of that. Excellent point.
We included in here the contract that the Oregon HFMA uses to have all of our speakers sign and agree to everything. If they're not willing to do this, we typically will not invite them to present at our chapter, just because we need that experience to be great for those who are online as well as those who are present. So feel free to copy that if you want to, but this is what we use. So just some best requirements, best practices. Again, coordinate with everybody within the chapter. Make sure your CVEN administrators on board as well. And of course, practice a million times. They say that you should always start your presentation 15 minutes in advance. We actually do that so that we can show all of our vendors who are supporting, and having that run through, so as people are joining, they're actually seeing the vendors over and over and over and over again. Something to keep in mind. You may want to implement if you're not doing that already. So I think we've gone through most of these. Michelle, do you have any other things to add on live streaming best practices?
No, I don't think so. The one question that did come up is, how do we handle speakers requesting to make content available for themselves? And so I think we can touch on that during the Q&A, but that kind of falls into this part too.
Yeah, no, that's great. I can answer that right now. I mean, right now what our chapter is doing to make the content available back to the speaker, we actually do editing on the videos. And so it ends up being a nice little piece for them to own as a speaker. But we put the link out there on our YouTube page, and they're able to go there. They're able to send people there. Even on their websites, they're able to link back to that YouTube presentation. In some situations, we have allowed them to take that video, and we've provided it to them. They're putting it on their website, but they have to leave it edited the way that we do. So it's branded with Oregon HFMA. They have to leave that branding in place because that was done at our chapter and part of that agreement. So that's what we're doing currently. We haven't had any pushback, which is great. And it does help the impressions that we get on YouTube, which is good. and it just gives more more notoriety to the chapter. Sorry. So with that, we have a whole bunch of extra slides, by the way, a whole bunch of detail that's behind this slide here with great content that we're going to provide, but we just didn't have time to go into it in this session.
So some of the questions that have come up in the chat, website platform and maintenance, we use Bluehost is our hosting, and then WordPress is our platform that it is built on. As far as maintenance, one of the slides is buried later in after this one, is that we converted our communications team to a technology and communications team. So that team is actually who is responsible for maintaining the website, the social media, doing the video, doing the live streaming, doing all sorts of that kind of stuff. So that's really kind of how we set it up. Go ahead.
One thing I'll add to that, Michelle, sorry, is that's a great way to capture a lot of the younger generation. Mm-hmm. and bring them in, is having them participate in the technology committee. They have the expertise. You have to work with them on a couple of things, but for the most part, they're really great and they bring many awesome ideas. So I do recommend that technology committee in every chapter.
Yeah. And we do use Cvent. So even with the live streaming and the people who are registering to be watching it at home, when we also do in-person events, we do use Cvent so that we have a record of attendance for across the board.
We have slides also that are showing how we integrate Cvent into this process using Zoom and everything, and those are part of the slide deck that we're not going to present today.
Let's see. And then one of the questions was the interaction or networking between attendees that are in person with attendees that are participating virtually in the breakout rooms. I will be honest, that is one of the areas we have not mastered. Very much, we've got breakout rooms for people now that we're doing all virtual, but we really had not, we acknowledged that it was an issue, but we had not really tackled and figured out a way to have networking between people who were in person and people who were online.
Right. So
that is certainly something we need to work on.
Yeah. What we've done to compensate is while it's going on in live, we're actually taking the camera and we are zooming in on the different conversations so that people online can see the groups chatting. And then we are sharing after, of course, what's being said online with those in the room. So that's what the technology committee does, shares with the presenter and what's being said online, while also zooming around with the camera. That's why you have that tripod to try to capture what's also happening in the room. It's not a perfect solution, but that's what we've done to date to try to bring them together.
Things that we're considering doing for LTC is having someone with a laptop, connected to Zoom at each area, even though we're not in a round table area, but having a laptop available so you can have that engagement with the individuals and putting that breakout room at the table itself. So there are ways, and now you would have to have a laptop, in let's say you have 5 breakout rooms, you would have to have those available. However, most people are traveling with them and then they just need the Zoom connection to be able to participate in that, round table per se. So there are workarounds. It does take coordination, and like Jeff said, practice. I can't reemphasize that enough. But great information. I do have I totally lost my train of thought. I had a question about when you guys are now everything's virtual. When we go back, there's going to be that component where people are wanting to be engaged and interactive. And, the breakout rooms are one thing. When you're moving around, Jeff, have you guys considered a 360 camera? Only because we're looking at that for a networking where the camera just does it on its own, or do you recommend having that Zoom feature? Has that been good feedback that people can actually get closer and then go away? I'm just curious.
Michelle and I did talk about the 360 camera, but we weren't sure how to implement it depending on the room. So, right now what we're doing is just manually zooming in. So we have someone running the camera the entire time.
Okay.
And zooming in and out. That's a great thought, Tracy.
It's a great thought, and the one, as you're looking at cameras, one thing to think about is the camera has to be capable not only of live streaming but also recording at the same time. So some cameras are out there will do one or the other, but they won't do both simultaneous. So making sure that the camera you purchase is one that can accomplish both goals.
And Michelle has offered to send me the Amazon links for those things. So I will put those with the speaker resources that we talked about earlier and put all the Amazon links together. So we'll have that. And Michelle and Jeff will be more than happy to share their deck with us as well, so we can populate that in the community, so it's a reference after the fact.
Yes, in fact, you have it, so that's good.
Yeah, I have it.
Any other questions?
Michelle and I are also happy to join any chapter if you're trying to implement it and you have some ideas, or you just are trying to figure things out and you want us to meet with your team. I'd be happy to show you, do a hands-on with them. So whatever works.
And we can't thank these two enough. They were awesome at LTC, awesome today, awesome every other day of the year. So thank you guys for your participation and willingness to share. I think that you guys have been doing this for a while, and definitely the leaders across the organization. So like I said, I can't thank you guys enough for helping with these presentations.
Well, thank you for having us.
You, yeah.
And may the force be with everyone.
Yeah.